All righty. Welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, serving online information entrepreneurs throughout the US and the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am super excited about our topic and our guest today. This is going to be outside of the norm a little bit, super, super relevant. And you're going to have so much fun hearing from Efren Delgado. Welcome, Efren.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, we're going to have a lot of fun. I could tell based on our first conversation, this is going to be really insightful. And folks, stick around because you're going to walk away learning a lot about human nature, a bit about psychology, a lot about our guest, and we're going to have a good time. For those of you that don't know Efren A. Delgado, a former FBI special agent with 25 years of national security, law enforcement, and private protection experience, has added author and speaker to his threat assessment and consultation profession. His advanced behavioral studies in graduate school and at an FBI specialized unit near Quantico complemented his work experiences in counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and violent civil rights investigations. Efren's years of examining and combating spies, predators, and tyrants extends beyond criminality, revealing how true strength lies in humility, not oppression. Efren, I'm so excited to dig in with you today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of intense background, but
I was
we,
going to
we'll
say,
bring
this
it
is
back down to earth.
very, very different than any other guest we've had on to date.
Good.
Yeah, it's excellent though. I mean, you come with quite a background, and I imagine just in the nature of this work, like, do you feel like you've just had a lifetime studying human behavior, human, I don't even know what to describe it, like characteristics, signs, signals, communication, everything, right? Just really studying
Yeah,
humans.
I think you nailed it. It's really a lot of indicators that once you understand them, they're not difficult to assess. And the bad guys, the bullies, the tyrants of the world really kind of scream their actual nature. While they lie to you to your face, their natures are very obvious. And just the kind of make an obvious example, the louder somebody is for whatever reason, even though in the context does not reasonably make it seem like, okay, they should be loud, then the opposite is true. So just to dive right in, I think of bad guys, criminals, tyrants, not so nice people. I compare them to chihuahuas barking at the doorbell. Because what do they do when the doorbell rings? Little dogs, they just yap, yap, yap. Are they yapping because they're brave and strong? Not really. They're yapping because they're so scared that what might be on the other side and eat me. Meanwhile, people in your audience, the risk takers, the ambitious people really striving to live a full life, are taking chances. They're making themselves vulnerable. They're taking risks. And the bad guys are envious of people who have that actual strength. So I titled the book The Opposite is True.
Well, you just illustrated a great example. I mean, I think it's really clear. I was a former owner of a Chihuahua. I called Tanner was his name. I called him my accident. I had a lab shepherd mix that I adopted actually a month after I got Tanner, and they were quite the combo, but I was raised by a veterinarian. So it was like there was a little Chihuahua in Eastern Washington and Chihuahuas, let's just be clear, are not good fits for Eastern Washington. It's like agricultural coyote area, right?
Very
It's
vulnerable, yeah.
very vulnerable. It's eagles, it's big birds, like they're not designed to be in Eastern Washington. And so
Wow.
I was in Seattle at the time, and I told my sister, just bring him over here. I'll find a home for him in Seattle. Anyways, a few months later, I could not find a home for him because every person that came in the door, I was like, I don't know whether they're going to be a good dog owner. I don't know whether they're going to take
Yeah,
care of him or not. So I ended up accidentally adopting a Chihuahua and a Lab Shepherd mix at the same time. But
that's nice.
I know
They
what you
help
say
each
is
other.
true. They did. And she really mellowed out. Like Pepper was the bigger, mellower dog,
Hmm.
really helped Tanner to mellow out. But I saw times where he was just like you described, on high fear alert and barking, barking, barking. And when you think about that and extend that analogy to humans, and particularly as I look at my work, and I know that when we first connected, I talked a bit about how frequently inside the legal system and
Hmm.
inside just really the world of my clients' problems generally, people are interacting with somebody like that on the other side, who is a bully, a tyrant, you know, just has bad behaviors going on for whatever reason or whatever
Right.
personality problem they have. How frequently those types of people end up inside the legal system or inside of one of my clients' businesses, really causing a lot of problems.
Right. So if you could spot them from afar, you could avoid a lot of problems. And I have a whole chapter on instinct, intuition. We all have this
Mm,
natural ability that has nothing to do with being a psychic medium or anything. It's
yep.
it's founded in logic.
Yep.
And I kind of explain some obvious examples. Like I think I start out with imagine yourself at an ATM machine in the summer months of Arizona, really hot, and oh, it looks like we cut out a little bit.
Oh, did we?
Yeah, just for like a few seconds.
Okay. I can
So
hear
just resume.
you. Yep, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, I'll just
Uh,
resume from that example.
okay. And what I'll do, I can hear my hubby upstairs. I'm just gonna text him real quick.
Uh-huh.
Just in case. I don't know if the internet is being weird on your end or my end. I'm just gonna let him know if he can shut down any streaming. I don't think he is, but in case he's on a meeting. Um,
Yeah,
give me just a second, and my editor can cut this out.
no
Um,
problem.
um,
This is fun.
I know, right? This is real life with technology. Um, and if we have to, like I said, we can turn off video if that helps us get a better audio.
Okay.
Um, okay, so I'll just
Yeah, it was
see.
just those few seconds, then everything's fine
Okay.
now.
Well, and we'll see if it just is like every so often, we'll probably be okay. If it acts up more frequently, let me know and we can figure out, do we need to reschedule? Is it potentially an airport connection thing? I don't know.
I show a full signal, so far so
Okay.
good.
Okay. Well, let's just keep
Yeah.
going.
Okay.
So, yeah, so you were
So
talking about the example in Arizona, right?
right. So imagine yourself at an ATM machine in the summer months in Arizona, and there's somebody standing behind you with a ski mask on. Now, that's not the appropriate attire for the summer months. You're not judging them for their attire or being judgmental of somebody, you know. So the point is your logic can take you to your natural instinct. And you can't always put your finger on what's the funny feeling I have and why am I uneasy with this person. But my point is there's probably a good reason and you need to trust it. And the less you use your instincts, the more they will atrophy. So the more you use it, the more refined you'll get, and you'll almost become psychic. It'll feel like you're psychic when you just start relying on it.
Mm,
And so I guess at the end of the day, I'm saying listen to your instincts and then explore where that's coming from. So you do back it up with actual substance. But to avoid danger, you don't need to convince anybody. You just get out of it.
right. And sometimes it's the difference between making a split decision or not. It has a pretty dramatic outcome as one example. And I fully, support everything that you've just said. And whether it's visually, like I feel like there's lots of ways that we take in information. I even think about being in a room where somebody comes into the room and just the energy changes in the room. Like
Yeah,
that feels different. You know what I mean? And
that's legitimate.
It's legitimate, and you can tell based on somebody's face, based on the way they physically present, and I feel like there are systems that we have that are in tune to this, that are just part of our biology, that not everything is necessarily being run through the logical brain, but we are making instantaneous decisions as part of our survival mechanism. It's the way that we're designed. And I think of one really poignant example from
Right.
my college days. I was in Salt Lake City. I will just say at that time we were on the wrong side of the tracks. My friend, we were going to a music venue that her brother was playing in. So we were going to support his music, and we had to stop at a gas station. And we had stopped, this was pre-cell phone days. We'd actually stopped at a payphone to
Okay.
get proper directions because we couldn't find it. And I looked across, I was at the payphone, but it was actually my friend's car she was driving. And I looked across the kind of the lot that the gas station sat on, right? So you're like
Right.
looking kind of like past the gas station pumps and everything. And there was a guy walking on the opposite sidewalk, like the diagonal sidewalk. But in an instant, I could tell something was wrong with him.
Right.
Right. And within a second of seeing him, I said, Jenny, get in the car right now. And she had to go around to get in back into the driver's seat. And I had to go around because I'd been at the payphone to get on her side. And so I literally was closing the car door when he was there trying to like pull it open from the outside.
Wow.
And that's me.
If you
Yes.
had hesitated at all, you guys would have been hurt.
Yeah, I mean, it just, who even knows? And so, she's locking the door and driving the way, and I'm pulling the car door closed. And to this day, I don't know what it was about him that registered as dangerous and bad, but within an instant, I knew, and I told her, get in the car right now, like right now.
That is an excellent example because who cares about offending people when your safety's on the line? So
Yes.
whether you're on a date or whether you're about to do a business contract with somebody, trust your gut. And if you can't put
Yes.
your finger on it, don't worry about it. Who cares if people get offended? You
Well,
don't want to
and
lose all your money and you don't want to lose your life.
this is it. And in particular, I think men have a bit more freedom in society to be louder, to be a little bit more,
Yeah, it's true.
out front with things. Women are definitely, just through, not always intentionally, but certainly through societal structures and influences, women are supposed to be more compliant. Our safety historically literally depended on us going along, right? And usually relying on somebody else for protection.
Yeah, that makes sense. Women are more vulnerable. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
And dealing in that reality, whether it's comfortable or not, will help you. Denying that
Yes.
reality will put people in danger. And that generalizes to anytime you're in denial, you're choosing comfort over reality, and comfort will get you in trouble.
Yes.
We all want
Comfort
to be
is
comfortable.
not actually comfort when you start to dissect it and look at what the
That's an
outcomes are.
illusion.
Yes.
And a lot of the bad guys, whether you're a bully, a tyrant, criminal, a lot of the bad guys bask in comfort, ironically. So
Mm,
they're so selfish that they'll choose anything to cover up and protect their vulnerability. So they think of kind of the world as fodder for their protection. They don't say that. So they convey all this strength, but they take advantage of people to put little band-aids over the gushing wounds that they have deep inside. But these little band-aids are just temporary, I guess, not solutions, but they're temporary uh, remedies to feel better temporarily, but they never actually become better people because the answer to fulfillment is selflessness. And that's what the good
mm,
guys do. They make themselves vulnerable for other people, for themselves, for their families. They have goals, they have North Stars, and all that takes work and effort, strength, and risk. And the bad guys are envious of the strength of the good guys. So that's why they lash out, attack. So they have multiple motives for being bad, but the bottom line is we will be their victims if we sulk in denial. So if we just kind of live in the real world, trust our gut, and face them, we can
mhm.
manage them.
Yeah, well, and so much of even the work that I do is actually around helping people understand their business boundaries, but it
Mm,
ultimately is about communication, right? How do we communicate? Well, first of all, how do we recognize what other people are communicating? So it sounds like you've got a way to help people spot what might be coming. I have what I call a red flags kind of checklist that I go over with clients about, like, these are the
yeah,
things to watch for that tells you a red flag
good.
client is coming. I'd be curious, like, using that terminology, what you see as red flags.
Yeah, I'm curious about your list too.
Mhm. Yeah, so my
You're
list,
skipping a
is
little
it?
bit.
Okay. Well, am I back?
Just
Should
let
we?
it pass. Okay, I'm getting you back.
Okay. Let's try powering off video.
Yeah, you're back now.
Okay. I'm going to stop video and see if this will help optimize our audio quality. You're welcome to as well if you want
Okay.
to try to optimize audio, and we can just put a placeholder for the video, like our images. We'll still publish video. It'll just be images, like a thumbnail in the video versus the actual video. But we'll see if we can
Okay.
optimize audio quality. Okay.
Okay, how's that?
Yeah, I can hear you well. So just keep me posted on whether I do any more cutting out.
Okay.
Okay. So my red flag list tends to be things that are, I would say, anytime my clients have what are called like a red flag scenario, we look backwards like, okay, what went wrong? What flags did you see that you maybe ignored that, caused you to, in reflection go, oh, I should have actually paid attention to that, right? So over many years of practice, I've been in the legal practice for over 20 years now. There's a list of things that I think can help people spot certain behaviors that they should avoid in a new client, right? And actually would cause me to tell a client, like, we're probably not the right fit. Um, but usually it's things like asking for special concessions or making a big deal out of something that's actually quite small,
Yep.
or saying things at the very start that are already pushing boundaries. So for example, maybe you describe to somebody the way that you typically engage in your client work and you've got a system that you follow, and they start picking apart the system or saying, oh, well, that part doesn't really apply to me. And it's this process of kind of creating exceptions, like in their way trying to tell you I'm exceptional, right? And what it really is going to mean is, like, you're going to inherit a bunch of heartache if you work with me.
Those are great examples, and I feel like you could teach this stuff too. And I'll tell
Well,
you why. You're recognizing consciously or unconsciously, or just from experience, that outside of context and continuum always matters. And I say
mm,
that because if you think about context, it just tells you what's appropriate, what isn't appropriate based on the certain scenario. So right now I'm in the private sector, and I do threat assessments and private security, physical security, that sort of thing. And what I do when I have a new detail, every detail is different, is it's kind of establish a norm. And then you're probably not old enough, but we used to have this old game called whack-a-mole. And
I
and
am old
so
enough.
you are old enough. Okay, good. So whack-a-mole is this game where these little plastic or clay or whatever they were, moles would jump out of a kind of a row of like a 3 by 3 or something, and you just hit it with this rubber hammer as it jumps out. So whack-a-mole. So in security, you look for the norm, you establish what that norm is, and you look for outliers or anomalies. Like if you're at a Taylor Swift concert and everybody's dressed a certain way and cheering and has a smile across their face, and another random guys wearing full camouflage and walking with a black, I don't know, hoodie with a scowl on his face, that guy's going to catch your attention.
Hmm.
And I'm not judging the person sex race, clothing. What I'm doing is looking for an anomaly in a sea of whatever the consensus is.
Yep.
So even if they don't do anything, it gets your attention. So outside of context, people's extreme behaviors point to the opposite. So somebody's constantly verbalizing their resume and how competent they are and how strong and smart and brave they are. And probably the opposite is true. Um,
Mm,
and so same with like business savvy or legal savviness or being a great family member or a great friend. People who are really competent and authentic don't have to showboat all those things. The proof is in the pudding, and it just is more organic.
mm,
So, so those red flags you've noticed are concrete, but they could easily be generalized to a bigger picture of like why do they have to say so much instead of just hearing how the company does things or what your policies are or what the culture of the company is. So
yes.
I think you're really onto it.
Well, you've got some great examples there as well. The showboating and the overstating. I mean, I think it's really interesting because in the world of entrepreneurship, so many of us learn I mean, we have to in order to run a business, right? You have to get good at sales, meaning that you have to show up and be able to convey in a way that is uh connects with your preferably ideal client, ideal customer, what you do and how you help them. And clearly, in the world of entrepreneurship, and I work with all small businesses and entrepreneurs, including a lot of entrepreneurs who consume B2B services, right? They are consuming support services from other business owners, but how often something does get overstated or oversold and underdelivered. It's really interesting, like how far you could take this concept. But
Right.
the overstatement, like I think everybody listening knows the difference between connecting with someone where they're like, you know what? This person is genuine. I trust what they're saying is true. They didn't need to overstate their experience. I can read it or I can see it or I can hear it in the way that they just describe their work versus and how often, I mean, this is an unfortunate example, but I feel like it happens a lot.
Mhm.
And I don't know why it's one that stands out. Maybe it's because of my own past in the world of religion, but folks who are like, they lead with religion, like I'm a Christian, God-fearing man or whatever. There are
Right.
certain things like that that when overstated repeatedly, like my initial outlook is like, you're somebody who's up to some bad things, which is why you have to say that repeatedly.
Right. That's good intuition. Yeah,
But
otherwise you could state it naturally, organically in conversation, but you don't have to state it repeatedly. There's an
yes.
ulterior motive there. You're trying to cover something.
That's it. That's it. And I think everybody, whatever their things are that are on their list, they know how it feels to have somebody say something in a way that's like, there's something more there. And I think the key, which you mentioned really early on, is learning to pay attention to that instinct,
Right.
learning to pay. And it's really interesting because when you think about even the context of business, having conversations with people, you mentioned, not wanting to offend people. I think we have a lot of motivators about why we don't address things at certain times. There was an example in my life with my son who was really young at the time, like 2.5. And he is a kid that was verbal very early. He really developed early, meaning that he was physical, rambunctious. He was very social. Like he would know all the names of the Starbucks baristas before I did. You know what I mean?
That's funny.
He was that kid. Yeah. And so we'd be going through Starbucks drive-through and he'd be like, there's Candy, and she's got our same last name, Campbell. Shout out to Candy at our local Starbucks. Anyways, we went through one day and there was a new guy and we didn't know him. And something about him was very off. And I will say that I noticed it. I sensed it right away. Luckily, it's a short interaction, and before I know it, I'm getting my drink and we're about to drive away. And Aiden says from the back seat as a 2.5-year-old, but kind of loudly, I don't like that guy.
I love that about kids. They're so brutally honest. I love it.
But initially my instinct was to be a little embarrassed, to be like, oh my gosh, what if he heard that? To try to, like, I remember turning and thinking like I needed to tell Aiden to like tone it down. And then I realized, I caught myself and I was like, no, I never want to tone that instinct down,
You
because
caught yourself. That's what matters.
yes, I cut myself. And as we were driving away, I said, sweetie, um, you're right. Something was off about that guy. And he was really little. I said, that is actually called an instinct. And I said, you have very good instincts about people.
Great
And
job, Heather. That's good mothering.
well, it was hard. I had some very, very early interactions in my own life by age 3 that were fairly traumatic, that taught me a lot about paying attention
Right.
to instincts. And so in my own mothering, I've really tried to help my kids nurture their own inner knowing. But it was funny at the time, I said, Jim, I said, do you know what an instinct is? And he said from the back seat, it's like monkeys swinging through trees. And I realized, okay, he might be a little bit young to talk about
A little
instincts.
abstract, yeah. But
Totally.
the
But
point is, you supported him and didn't scowl him for being socially inappropriate or offensive, or
yes,
all that other stuff that society tries to, I guess, disarm us from
yes.
our strengths and tools that we have naturally.
Well, that's right. And I think it's human nature to not want to offend, to not want to cause a problem. But I think that there are ways that we can address these things, whether it's just labeling it like, you know what, I
Yeah,
just don't think this is a fit. Or, you know what, I think you'd be better served by somebody else. Or, some way that you still allow yourself an exit from that scenario with a potential client or, fellow person in business where it's
right.
just not a fit.
One mistake a lot of the good guys make, your listeners, my readers, is we try, in an effort to be nice, we try to explain everything, but they'll twist that on us and take advantage of the good guys. So
Yes.
just make a mental note and then politely bow out. So you don't have to engage. You don't have to teach lessons to these people who give you red flags. You just have to preserve yourself, your goals, your family, your teammates, and go from there. I've got a good
Mm,
example. I put in my book when I was young, we had a neighbor who would host these barbecues, these neighborhood barbecues. And, it was the early 80s and everybody's having fun. They were really sweet. But my mom had a very funny feeling about Ricardo, the father of the household, who would host these
mm,
barbecues. He'd give me too much attention when I was guessing like maybe 8 years old, 7 years old.
mm.
It was like 8 or 9, something like that. And after these little barbecues, my mom said to my father and my older brother, "Don't ever leave Efren alone with Ricardo." We're like, "Mom, you're overreacting. He's a nice guy." And then later, this same guy tried to give us, my brother and I, speakers, like music speakers, as a
Mm.
gift. Nowadays, we would call that grooming.
Yes. Yep. You
Long
sure
story
would.
short, I was never left alone with him. Years later, I'm in my dorm room at the University of Texas in Austin, and I get this thin envelope from my parents. It has a newspaper clipping inside, and I opened it up, and Ricardo had been convicted of child molestation for years
Ah,
from many, many victims,
mm,
and so spent, went to jail.
yeah.
So my mom's instincts, she wasn't an FBI person, she wasn't a psychologist, she wasn't a cop, she was just a mother with good instincts.
Yeah.
And she listened to that. And to your point with what happened to you when you were younger and all the other adversity you've experienced in your life, I often say to encourage people, because we all have adversity,
Yep.
that adversity is the catalyst to purpose. And not only
Mm,
purpose, but to action and to success, because it'll drive us emotionally to do something about it, what we went through. The bad
mm.
guys end up attacking the world. The good guys grow from it because humility is the only path to wisdom, and adversity humbles the best of us.
Mm. Gosh, that's such a good phrase. I love that. Adversity is the catalyst to purpose. I'm writing that down.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good one.
it
It
is. Well,
encourages me too.
It well, and it's so true. I mean, similar to your experience when I was probably not even 3, 2.5. I was young enough to be very aware of what was going on, but still not as verbal as I wanted to be.
Mhm.
Like head to toe footy PJs, that's how little I was, like the zip up,
Right. So
PJs,
sweet.
yeah, from the 70s. So this would have been late 70s, probably 79. And it was a kid from our church that my parents brought over as a babysitter. And he was a teenager. But the second he walked in our house as a little tiny person, I knew something was wrong. And I did not
Right.
want him close to me. I did not, like, I was terrified that my parents were leaving us with him, but I couldn't verbalize it.
Yeah, gosh,
And
that's so frustrating. It's a
oh,
paradox.
yes, exactly. But, my early life lesson was to listen to my voice, to listen to that inner knowing. And then that translated into me actually using my voice and screaming my little head off, which I think saved me. It didn't save me from the trauma of the event itself,
Mhm.
but it saved me from anything going any further. And it what it taught me at a very young age was the power of my voice, the power of my
Yeah.
intuition and the power of my voice. And do you know that following that, I have spent time around people who, like you later learn like something pretty bad about them, where they took advantage of somebody or hurt children or whatever. I've had multiple people like that in my life that I have spent a lot of time around, and yet they did not cross my boundaries. And I wasn't aware that they even were the type of person that would, but I am convinced that that early experience gave me very strong boundaries with people.
Right.
Even just an
And justified.
energetic, yes, even just an
You didn't have to feel
energetic boundary.
apologetic about it.
Yes, and the way that I communicate has always been very clear, including with, professional colleagues and males. And so it is really interesting. And I agree with your statement that adversity is the catalyst to purpose and that we all have experiences, not exactly the same, but like this, that teach us a tremendous amount in our life and lead to, if we let it, lead to some pretty profound inner knowings and ways that we get to influence other people.
Yeah, that's really, really well said. And these patterns generalize to people like Hitler all the way to people who are just not so nice in our own families or
Yeah.
offices. So even the little bully in our family at the Christmas dinner, like nagging at you the way you made the turkey or whatever, they're coming from a place of weakness.
Yeah.
And the fewer people in our lives that are very supportive, always encouraging, always winning, very competent, they're by definition special because they're not like most people. And so they should be rewarded by our attention, our time. There's a concept that's not too profound, but very true in my book that I call association osmosis. And it's pretty much the idea that the people you hang out with are going to rub off on you whether you like it or not. So you
Mhm.
might as well be strategic and unapologetic about it.
That's right, and I think that's a hard lesson for a lot of people to learn. I mean, the number of times, even in the last few weeks, that I've had conversations with people in my life about, you know what? We get to create our own family just because, certain people might inherit certain family members who can be very challenging, doesn't mean that those bonds have to remain. Doesn't mean that you have to surround yourself with and I'm thinking in particular of a friend who used to be married, and one of the things she learned really early in therapy, which I consider a huge gem, was because she was complaining that her spouse didn't spend enough time around his family, but it turns out his family was quite toxic from the standpoint of like not being healthy people, not being good influences.
Interesting.
And yeah, and the therapist is like, why would you think that you need to spend more time around that? Even though they're family, that's not a choice you have to make. And
Right.
that was a big aha for her. I mean, we were in our 20s at that time, but I remember learning even through her, like talking about this osmosis, right?
Yeah.
Association through osmosis, what a gem of a lesson that was. That, you know what? We do get to choose who we spend time with. We do get to choose ultimately who our true family in this lifetime is. Doesn't have to be the people that are automatically there.
That's such a great point. And we often have these epiphanies in our 20s because we leave the nest. Kids that
Hmm.
are kind of stuck, but as adults, we kind of have an obligation to choose our own family. That's what friends are for. They become the families of our choices. Because
Yeah.
if you think about it, what does really DNA have to do with anything? Even God Himself, Jesus, God incarnate, made Himself be adopted by Joseph to prove to the world it's not about DNA, it's about heart, actions,
Mm,
support. So I often give that example to people who have had rough biological family members so they don't feel
yes.
this unnecessary guilt or obligation to be around toxic, unhealthy, or frankly dangerous, abusive people.
Yeah.
You could create your own family as an adult. That's the one of the beautiful things about being an adult. You choose your own family and you cut off who you need to cut off, or you limit who you have to limit. It's a continuum. It doesn't have to be black and white.
Yeah.
Depending on the severity, that's how much you cut off. But don't feel guilty about your decisions.
No, that's right. And I think that, the more that you feel free to make decisions that are healthy decisions and that recognize the truth of a situation. And I think, that's the hard thing. I look at probably you and I grew up in the same generation where the
Mhm.
message from my parents was like, be nice and you be nice to everybody at school. And the messaging that I give to my children is like, yes, we should try to be kind. And you need to recognize that you don't need to have a relationship with everybody at school.
Right.
You need to watch for the kids where relationship is a two-way street. They treat you kindly and they're respectful of you and vice versa. But if you're trying to be friends with a bunch of kids that could care less or are dismissive of you or leave you out of things, like those are not the types of relationships we need to pursue. And that's the conversation I'm having with my kids, which I feel like is quite a bit different than probably the messaging that many of us got as children.
Yeah, I love that because I remember I was the kid always questioning the teachers, questioning authorities. So, of course, I got my share of trouble. Um, but it wasn't out of like being bad. It was just literally questioning. And sometimes the adults were wrong. And I
Yes.
look back now, I'm 48 years old. I look back now at some of those times in elementary school, and I'm like, the kid was the right one, not the adult.
Oh, it's so true.
So it's
And
tough. Yeah,
it is tough. And even on that point, the conversation that I have with my kids is like adults are going to fail you. Even mommy and daddy are going to fail you.
right.
And that's one of all of our life lessons, but the very most important thing is how you feel about yourself and that you never give up on that internal voice. And I mean, so it's just fascinating how relevant this conversation is literally to every area of life. A couple things, because I know we've been a little slowed down by our connection, and I want to be super respectful of your time. But I have a couple of questions that I know we need to get to. And one is I would love to hear what drew you into your line of work. How did you decide that this is what you wanted to pursue?
Well, it's a similar topic, but I opened my book by describing. I started second grade. I started school 1 year younger than all the other kids. I just started a year early. And if kindergarten and preschool, first grade, no big deal. Everybody's essentially a toddler.
Yep.
But when I joined, the older you get there, there's a bigger difference in 1 year. So
Yeah.
when I joined second grade at a new school down the street from where I lived, um, everybody was great except two kids who bullied me because I was young, sweet, naive, this sweet little
Mm,
kid, 1 year younger than everybody. And looking back, it wasn't this intense bullying. Like Elon Musk was actually hospitalized from being bullied.
Oh,
So I had
wow.
nothing like that. But like I said, everything's context and continuum. So it's relative. Trauma
Yep.
is still legitimate to anybody perceiving it.
Yep.
So I remember asking at that young age, why would somebody be mean when they could simply be nice?
Yeah.
And if you think about that question, it's the fundamental question of psychology. Why do people do what they do? And deeper, it's the fundamental question of criminology. Why do bad people do what they do? So that sparked my interest in human behavior, psychology, criminology without knowing all of those labels.
Yep. Yep.
And so I always had that interest. I got held back that year just to catch up with the other kids. Even though I was passing, it was kind of subpar. So I did second grade again. And the way I phrased it in the book is my parents and teachers thought it was for the best, which I interpreted as I was stupid. So
Yeah.
there's some adversity there, some humility there. And a humility is the only path to wisdom, even for a child. And so when I
Mhm.
went to a different school, to second grade again, I entered kind of cynical, but my natural personality is to have sense of humor and be kind. And before you knew it, I was making people laugh and I became one of the popular kids, to my surprise. So I
Mhm.
vowed to myself I was always going to protect the kids who couldn't protect themselves. And this isn't like any knowledge of FBI, criminology, or psychology. It was just kind of a human nature thing. Like, I know what that's like, and I'm always going to protect kids who can't protect themselves. So
Mm.
I think that sparked my interest, and I just kept pursuing it, psychology, criminology, and whether even if the FBI never existed, I still would have done that sort of work. And it's what I'm doing now in the private sector. And even with my book, I'm essentially protecting the good guys and exposing the bad guys for the weak little chihuahuas barking at the doorbells that they are.
It's so interesting. There was a case years ago that I worked on, like talking about this Chihuahua analogy. And it was a really tough case. There was a business partner that had hamstrung a couple of other business partners after completely stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from them and also not
Wow.
paying like employment taxes. And so he'd really caused some problems for the business, was all caught up in litigation. And then at the same time, they had a bank that was calling the loans due on the underlying real estate. Like there were multiple problems, but that could not be resolved so long as this partnership dispute was going on. And this guy knew it. So he wanted to hang everybody up and basically get a lot more money. He'd already stolen way too much from the partners and the business. And
Wow.
anyways, and he was lying to the court. So, and one of the parties had been represented by a big law firm here in Seattle. I ended up stepping in the 11th hour. And my advice to the remaining two business partners was fire your counsel. Here's the conversation that you need to go have face to face with this guy, where he understands exactly what's going to happen if he pursues this route, which were all legal outcomes. Like, look, we're going to hire a PI, we're going to follow, because he was making all these claims about being dirt poor and not having any money, and that his kids couldn't afford shoes on their feet, and these pretty insane things that were not true, but as a way to try to garner, you know,
Empathy. Yeah.
empathy and
Sympathy.
sway with counsel and with the court. And he was just
Manipulative.
a manipulative liar.
Yeah.
That's how he got through life, was manipulating and lying to everybody. And so
It
I
sounds like
just
psychopathy.
yes, it was bad. And I just told them, like, look, as crazy as he might be, he cares about his kids. His wife is going to care about the kids. And you sit down and have this very hard conversation about, like, here's what we're going to do if you don't drop this case. And they went and had it. And guess who was ready to settle within about 24 hours of that conversation?
Excuse me.
And none of the other counsel knew why. Like the counsel that had represented these guys, that I mean, they had like $100,000 legal bill. nobody knew why suddenly this guy was ready to be done and settle for zero money, no longer demanding like a 70 or $80,000 payment, which by the way, one of the partners was ready to pay. And I was like,
Wow.
hell no, you're not paying him another cent. And this is just a really
Good for
classic
you.
example of the
Yep.
ways that people will manipulate and be that barking chihuahua and utilize the legal system to a really unfair advantage because
What I
they're,
love about that is you recognize those signs. So you're able
yeah.
to use it in your negotiation of the whole thing, your position.
Well, and luckily I had clients that were able to hear me and go do that very hard thing of a face-to-face conversation with somebody who'd been an extreme bully, but really like lay it out for him. And it wasn't, it wasn't threatening anything that couldn't be done within the legal system and the legal way that you handle things as far as discovery goes and hiring investigators and doing all of this work to the nth degree. But it was just laying it out in a way where he quickly realized the payoff was not actually the payoff that he wanted. And this potential damage to, to their personal life and family through all of these exposures of the lies was going to be really problematic. So
That's
anyways, it
great.
was it was a really interesting scenario, but it was exactly that where I was like, you've got a guy on the other side who is totally a toxic bully, and with those type of people, you have to have a very big stick if you're going to play their game.
Yeah, and sometimes simply standing up for yourself, everybody says punch the bully in the nose.
Yeah.
They're not used to that because being a bully is effective.
Yes.
Most people don't want problems. Most people are quickly intimidated because the good guys don't need problems.
Yeah.
But when you do stand up for yourself and you punch them in the nose, or, figuratively speaking, sometimes
Yep.
literally,
Yeah,
they
or
really back down their true
conceptually,
colors.
that's
Yeah,
right. Conceptually punch them in the nose. We can say that totally.
right, exactly. And their true colors quickly come out. I was never a cop, but I have a lot of cop friends, and I'm in the LA area, so they've had to deal with gangs. And one
Yes.
pattern they often tell me is when they're with all their buddies, they're all tough, but when they're about to arrest a gang member by himself, they quickly give up.
Yeah.
So it's all of that.
Yeah. Well, it's, and the other thing that you said that I felt like, I didn't emphasize enough at the start of the conversation was how certain people can become targets, right? And you put somebody who maybe is a business owner, an entrepreneur, even somebody like yourself that writes a book or get on stages, and then they're in the limelight and people start to think like, I mean, and I will say the wrong kind of people, bullies, people that might target others. And it absolutely is true in business as well, that small businesses, entrepreneurs, people who are, moving and shaking and really doing interesting things, they can become targets. And that's the really
Absolutely.
unfortunate side of business, is actually being aware that that's the reality. And then it's just about how do you deal with it? And from me, obviously, my perspective is legally, how do you prepare for that? How do you, just plan for that stuff to happen at times so that you are set up in a way where you can quickly deal with it?
Yeah, that's a good point. And what's interesting is their motive. We've touched upon it, but it's a two-parter. One, they don't want to be exposed. So when we're
Yes.
talking about these truths and then revealing them as the Chihuahuas barking at the doorbell, the um, the idea is they're always trying to hide their weaknesses, their vulnerability with such loud peacocking. So if we're exposing them, they will be threatened and they'll want to attack like a cornered lion. Uh, the other motive that they have is they're envious. They're jealous of the
Yes.
people pursuing their dreams, their goals, having success because they're not brave enough to take those risks and go for it. And so they want to pull other people down off their wall so that they don't feel as bad about their pathetic lives, frankly.
That's right. That's right. And I've seen it time and again with clients. I've seen it with people in my own personal life. It's unfortunate, but what you describe is absolutely true. Efren, my goodness, I feel like we could keep chatting. I've so enjoyed connecting with you and hearing your insights on this. I can tell that through your work, you have a big heart for helping people. I'm sure that that is what has led to you publishing a book on this topic.
Absolutely.
Where's your book available?
So anywhere your favorite book retailer, but the easiest way is you could go to my website and there's a button there that could access it to anywhere. My website is Efren Delgado. That's Delgado.com. So pretty simple there. It'll tell you a little bit about the book. There's a page about me, my background, and there's a quick button there to access the book if you'd like.
Awesome. I love it. Well, we will definitely share the link over to your website, to your book, as well as your social. I know you shared some social handles. You're on Facebook, Instagram, as well as LinkedIn. Um, do you like to connect with people online, and where would you direct them?
I do. I think Instagram for people following me is probably the best, which is just at Efren Delgado.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we're very happy to share that as well. Efren, I so appreciate you. This is a topic I care a lot about. I mean, I think that you have spent a whole career studying it. I'm super excited to go check out your book. I feel like, even just based on this short discussion, there's a lot of alignment in the way that we think about certain behaviors and red flags in other people. And it's just super important that we all recognize this is a part of life, and it's certainly a part of being better at business and even leadership, and certainly even personal leadership, right? So if somebody's listening to this that is not even in the entrepreneurial world, just personal leadership in life generally, it's such an important topic.
That's really well said, just for your audience to remember, we're all human, and adversity is the catalyst to wisdom. And the bad guys don't pursue that wisdom; they just cower in the fetal position. But I think Heather, you're a great example of someone who's overcome broad adversity, and look at you now. So, not to sound condescending, but I'm proud of you, and I think a lot of your audiences too. I'm sure that's why they're part of your audience.
Oh, well, I so appreciate that. Efren, I am super excited to share this. I can't wait to send people your way. Thank you so much for being here. I know, because you have such a big heart, I want to mention really quick, you've got a 5-step guide, right? And I think it's accessible right on your website.
It is. It's a one click, and it's a way to kind of subscribe to my newsletter. I call it the Roundup Rag. I essentially get an idea on a topic I want to address, and I'll write a short page and a half on it. But there's a free PDF there that will give you 5 counterintuitive truths that could quite potentially turn your life around when you see these counterintuitive and paradoxical realities. But it's for the benefit of your audience, the good guys, as
Yep.
opposed to the bad guys.
That's right. We
Yeah.
are we are here to help the good guys. So folks, make sure you pop over and get that. That is the 5-step guide to transform your human insecurities into superhuman strengths. Efren, I so appreciate you. I'm going to give you the final say. What, aside from going and grabbing that, what final step or takeaway would you like to leave people with?
I think the one takeaway that is really vital is fruit grows in valleys, not on mountaintops. So just remember, humility is the only path to wisdom. Those who are humble are your allies. Those who are prideful probably don't have your best interests. So just stay humble and move forward.
I love that. Fruit grows in valleys. Goosebumps. Okay, folks, you heard it here. Efren, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.